What if everything you were taught about earning respect was wrong? Not slightly off, not missing a few nuances. Fundamentally, structurally, completely wrong, the way a compass is wrong when you are holding it next to a magnet, pointing with total confidence in a direction that leads you further from where you actually need to go. What if the more you explain yourself, justify yourself, defend yourself, soften your edges, volunteer your reasoning, perform your value, the more respect you lose? What if the very act of trying to be understood is the most efficient mechanism ever invented for ensuring that you will never be fully respected? Pay close attention to what I'm about to tell you, because this is not a motivational speech. This is not a framework for positive thinking, or a system for improving your communication skills, or a guide to being more likable at dinner parties. This is a quiet, dangerous, precise truth that Niccolò Machiavelli understood 500 years ago while sitting in a cold room writing by candlelight, stripped of all the comforts and social lubricants that make people soft, and that most people alive today will encounter, feel the weight of, and then quietly set aside because it asks something of them that comfort-seeking life has made nearly impossible. It asks them to stop explaining, stop justifying, stop performing, stop seeking, stop translating themselves into a language designed specifically for other people's ease. And that stopping, that deliberate, practiced, almost architectural stillness, is where everything changes. Respect is not given to those who ask for it. It is surrendered, involuntarily, by people who cannot help themselves, surrendered to those who carry themselves as though the verdict was rendered long before they entered the room, and it was rendered in their favor, and no further discussion is necessary. Think about the last time you felt genuinely disrespected. Not the catastrophic kind, not a public humiliation or a dramatic betrayal. The ordinary kind, the kind that happens in the middle of a Tuesday. Someone talked over you in a meeting, not aggressively, just casually, as if your voice had not yet registered as a voice worth waiting for. Someone dismissed your idea with a single sentence and moved on to the next topic before you'd even finished processing the dismissal. Someone looked through you in a social situation, eyes already scanning the room for whoever was next, before you'd finished your sentence. Someone didn't respond to your message for 3 days, and then replied with 2 words that made clear they had not particularly wondered where you were. And what did you do? If you're honest, if you're willing to sit with the discomfort of the honest answer, you tried harder. You spoke again, louder this time, or more carefully structured. You followed up the dismissed idea with additional reasoning, additional evidence, additional enthusiasm, designed to retroactively justify it. You smiled at the person scanning the room and tried again. You wrote a longer message the next time, with more warmth, more context, more investment. You explained yourself, you elaborated, you repeated, you accommodated. You made yourself smaller and called it maturity. You softened your position and called it open-mindedness. You absorbed the dismissal and called it resilience, and the disrespect continued. Not because the people around you are cruel, not because you lack value, but because every single response you chose sent the same invisible signal, received by every person in every one of those rooms, with the precision of an animal that has evolved over millennia to detect exactly this frequency. I need something from you. Please confirm that I am worth your attention, and the world, being what it is, responded to that signal the way it always does. It gave you less. This is the mechanism that Machiavelli saw, and that neither the educational system, nor the self-help industry, nor the people who love you have ever quite told you directly, because the truth of it is uncomfortable in a specific and personal way. You have been trained by school, by family, by every social structure you have ever moved through, to earn respect through legibility, through making your value visible, demonstrable, easy to read and confirm. Raise your hand before you speak. Wait your turn. Explain your reasoning. Show your work. Make people comfortable with your presence before you fully occupy it. This training was not malicious. Most of it came from people who cared about you. Most of it was designed to make you functional, cooperative, pleasant to be around. But it also, as a side effect, built something into the foundation of how you move through the world. A need, a structural dependence on the external confirmation of your internal worth, a way of inhabiting space that is always slightly provisional, always slightly waiting for the room's permission to be fully present. And that provisionality, that slight, almost invisible quality of waiting for the verdict, people feel it. Instantly. Without knowing they feel it. It is the frequency of diminishment, received before a word is spoken, processed below the level of conscious thought, filed away as the answer to an ancient question that hierarchy-navigating human beings have always asked about every person they encounter. Is this someone I need to take seriously? When you broadcast that you are waiting for their answer to that question, you have answered it for them. You have told them, not yet. There is a man who enters the same rooms you enter. He works in the same kinds of offices, navigates the same kinds of relationships, faces the same kinds of dynamics, the same social tests, the same ambient competition for status and visibility and regard. And something about the way he moves through all of it is different. He does not speak first. When the room is filling with sound and opinion and the performative confidence that most people mistake for actual confidence, he is quiet. Not conspicuously quiet, not the aggressive silence of someone demonstrating restraint. Just genuinely, naturally, unhurriedly quiet. As if he has been somewhere long enough to know when to speak and when to hold. When he is challenged, he does not rush to respond. There is a pause. A visible, unmistakable, slightly unnerving pause in which he appears to consider. Not scrambling, not managing his face, not generating a defense, but genuinely calmly weighing what just happened. And then he responds, briefly, precisely, without the apologetic scaffolding, without the hedging qualifiers, without the performance of certainty that is always distinguishable from the real thing. When he leaves a room, people feel the texture of his absence in a way they do not feel the absence of those who were louder, more present, more socially active while they were there. He is talked about, not with admiration exactly, with something closer to the involuntary attention we give to things we cannot quite account for. There's just something about him. You can't put your finger on it. He doesn't do anything obvious. He's just different. You know this man. You have been in the room with this man, maybe once, maybe many times. And if you are honest about your reaction to him, it is not simple admiration. It is something more complex, something that has a slight edge of frustration in it, because he seems to have something you want, and you cannot identify what it is precisely enough to acquire it, and that ambiguity is its own particular kind of discomfort. What he has is not charisma in the conventional sense. It is not status, although he may have it. It is not physical presence, although that may be part of it. It is not even confidence exactly, not the loud, self-announcing version we usually mean when we say that word. What he has is the specific quality of someone who has already answered the question the room keeps asking, the question everyone keeps asking of everyone else, silently, constantly, without interruption. Are you someone to be taken seriously? He answered it before he arrived, in private, in the months and years of small decisions that accumulated into a way of being, and because he answered it privately, he does not need the room to answer it for him. And because he does not need the room to answer it, the room, perversely, inevitably, as if by law, answers it in his favor. This is not an accident. This is not luck. This is not personality. This is architecture. It was built. It can be taught. Niccolò Machiavelli was born in Florence in 1469 and spent his life studying power the way a surgeon studies the body, not with sentiment, not with ideology, but with the cold precision of someone who needs to understand how it actually works in order to do anything useful with the knowledge. He served in government, watched princes rise and fall, witnessed the specific mechanisms by which authority was built, maintained, eroded, and destroyed. He understood something that the philosophers of his era, obsessed with how power should work, systematically refused to acknowledge: that power operates by its own logic, entirely independent of what is fair or kind or morally correct. And what he saw, watching the men who lasted against the men who fell, what he wrote about in The Prince with a directness that made comfortable people furious for 5 centuries, is that the leaders who commanded genuine, lasting, bone-deep respect were not the ones who worked hardest to be loved. They were not the most transparent, the most accessible, the most eager to explain themselves. They were not the ones who kept their people most informed about their private deliberations or their personal doubts. They were the ones who maintained what Machiavelli called gravitas, a kind of weighted, self-possessed composure that made them permanently difficult to fully read, not mysterious in the theatrical sense, not artificially cold or remote, but genuinely, substantively opaque in the way that anything with real depth is opaque. You can see the surface clearly, but you know with certainty that there is more beneath it, and that more is not being offered to you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. It is better to be feared than loved, he wrote, and the world pulled that sentence out of context and used it to paint him as a villain for half a millennium. What he meant was not terror. What he meant was not cruelty or intimidation or the coercive management of people through punishment. What he meant was the specific, particular, very precise relationship that people have with someone they cannot afford to underestimate. The internal recalibration that happens when you encounter a person whose reactions you cannot predict with confidence, whose approval you cannot take for granted, whose dismissal you cannot easily absorb without consequence to your own sense of standing. That person is not feared because they are dangerous in the obvious sense. They are feared because they are self-contained, because they are complete, because they carry something in themselves that does not require your validation to remain stable. And that self-sufficiency, in a world where almost everyone is walking around in a constant low-grade state of needing something from the people around them, is genuinely, viscerally unnerving. Complete people are rare, and rare things carry their own gravity. Let me tell you what has been happening to you, not as accusation, as diagnosis. Every day, across multiple interactions, you leak power without knowing it. You leak it in the preemptive apology before you share your opinion. You leak it in the smile that comes one beat too early, before you know whether the situation warrants it. You leak it in the message you sent, and then checked 3 times to see if it had been read. You leak it in the explanation that nobody asked for, in the justification that followed the position you had already stated, in the laugh that was not quite a laugh, the social laugh, the management laugh, the laugh designed to tell the room that you are not a threat, that you are easy, that you are comfortable to be around, that they don't need to worry about you. That laugh is surrender. You just don't call it that. Every one of these small behaviors, unremarkable individually, invisible even, accumulates into a pattern, a frequency, a way of existing in space that broadcasts continuously and without your consent the specific information that undermines everything else you are trying to build. I am uncertain of my own value, and I am managing that uncertainty by managing your perception of me. People receive this. They don't name it. They don't think about it consciously. They just respond to it. They respond by behaving with you in ways that reflect the dynamic you have established. They take a little more space. They push a little more. They test a little further. They interrupt a little sooner. They explain themselves to you a little less. They take a little longer to get back to you. They assume a little more confidently that they know what you will do next. And gradually, so gradually that you might not identify the exact moment it happened, you find yourself occupying less and less of the room you are actually in, not because you were pushed out, but because the pattern of your own behavior created a vacuum that other people naturally expanded into. This is the mechanism. This is the invisible tax. This is what Machiavelli understood and what nobody teaches. And this is what stops. Here is the thing about silence that nobody who has not truly learned it can fully appreciate. Silence is not empty. Most people experience silence as a problem, as a void that needs to be filled, as social failure, evidence that the conversation has broken down, that connection is not happening, that something needs to be rescued. And so they fill it, compulsively, with whatever is available, with opinions they haven't fully formed, with stories they've told before, with questions designed not to gather information, but to generate sound in the space where silence was making them uncomfortable. The man who has learned Machiavelli's rule experiences silence entirely differently. For him, silence is not empty. It is full of information he is gathering while others are talking, full of the specific kind of attention that only becomes available when you are not busy performing, full of the unhurried quality of someone who knows that when he speaks, It will land differently than the sound that has been filling the room for the past 10 minutes, because it will be rare, because it will be considered, because it will carry the weight of someone who chose to spend his time listening rather than being heard. And more than all of that, silence is the most precise possible expression of self-sufficiency. Of not needing the room to know that you are there, of being comfortable enough in your own presence that the presence of others and their opinion of you is interesting, is genuinely, humanly interesting, but is not necessary. That distinction between interesting and necessary is the whole game. When the opinion of others is interesting to you, you are free. You can engage with it, learn from it, update yourself based on it, and release it when it is not useful. You hold it lightly because it does not carry your weight. When the opinion of others is necessary to you, you are a prisoner. Every interaction becomes a negotiation for your own dignity. Every conversation becomes a potential threat or a potential rescue. Every silence becomes evidence. And you spend your energy, the same energy that could be going into becoming someone genuinely worth respecting, managing the anxiety of a verdict that has not yet arrived. Machiavelli's silent rule is not, at its core, a communication technique. It is a liberation. It is the specific, earned, daily practiced experience of not needing the room's permission to know your own worth. I want to be clear about something before we go further, because there is a version of this lesson that is heard by people who are already cold, already distant, already using unavailability as a defense mechanism against intimacy, and they hear it as permission, as a philosophy that validates their existing pattern. That is not what this is. Deliberate distance is not Machiavellian power. It is fear in a coat. It is the person who has been hurt enough that they have decided to preemptively withhold themselves, to never be fully present, never be fully invested, never let anyone close enough that they could matter, and they mistake this withdrawal for strength because it looks from the outside superficially similar to what power looks like. It is not. The contained man is not absent. He is present, deeply, fully, attentively present. He simply does not broadcast that presence indiscriminately. He does not perform it for the comfort of those who have not yet earned the full weight of it. He is warm, genuinely, humanly warm, but his warmth is not anxious. It does not chase. It does not accommodate in order to avoid conflict. It does not shrink itself so that others can feel bigger. His warmth is steady, available, real, but it belongs to him first, and from that ownership comes everything else. The goal is not to become a wall. The goal is to become a foundation, something that can be built upon, leaned against, trusted to remain, precisely because it does not move every time the wind changes direction. This is what we are going to build over the course of this video. Not a persona, not a performance, not a set of tricks to deploy in negotiations or first impressions. We are going to dismantle, piece by piece, the specific behaviors that have been draining your authority. Behaviors so habitual, so normalized by years of social conditioning that you have stopped noticing them as choices. We are going to look at what Machiavelli's 4 pillars of silent command actually require in practice. We are going to walk through the precise, tactical mechanics of how this operates in the environments where you spend your actual life. Not in hypothetical power games, but in Tuesday afternoon meetings, in relationships, in the kind of ordinary social interactions that quietly determine, over the course of a life, how much space you are given and how much you take. And then we are going to arrive somewhere that most people who watch videos like this never quite reach, the place past the tactics, the place where this stops being something you do and becomes something you are. Because that is the only version of this that lasts. Tactics practiced without conviction are just affectations. They fool nobody for long. The man who has genuinely built the interior life that makes these behaviors natural, who is not performing calm but actually finding it, not performing economy but actually valuing it, not performing non-reactivity but actually practicing it until it becomes real, that man does not need to remember the rules. He is the rules. That is what Machiavelli was ultimately describing. Not a set of manipulative strategies, a way of being so fundamentally self-possessed, so genuinely grounded in your own authority, that the world's treatment of you reorganizes itself around the quality of your presence. And that quality, That specific, rare, quietly devastating quality begins with understanding something that most people will live their entire lives without truly grasping. The game of respect is won in the interior. Everything visible is just the expression of what has already been decided, privately in the space where no one is watching and the stakes feel low. You do not become respected in the boardroom. You become respected in the moment you decide alone that you are no longer willing to negotiate the terms of your own dignity. That moment is available to you right now, and everything that follows is the architecture of what happens after it. Stay with me, because the coldest, most precise, most transformative part of this is still ahead. Most people hear the first half of Machiavelli's lesson and feel energized. They feel the weight of recognition. Yes, this is what I have been doing. Yes, this is what I need to change. And that energy is real, and it is valid. But energy without structure dissipates. Inspiration without a map becomes frustration. The next thing I am going to show you is the map, not in theory, in the specific, actionable step-by-step architecture of how the silent rule actually operates across the 4 domains of human power. Everything changes from here. Keep watching. Let's talk about what respect actually is. Not the word, not the concept as it lives in motivational posters or commencement speeches or the vocabulary of people who have confused being liked with being respected. Let's talk about what respect is in the wild, in real rooms with real stakes between real people who are all in their own way playing the same ancient and largely unacknowledged game. Respect is not admiration. Admiration is what you feel for someone extraordinary, for the athlete who does what you cannot imagine doing, for the artist who makes something that moves you beyond the capacity of language. Admiration has a quality of distance in it. It is the feeling of looking up at something from below and being genuinely glad it exists. Respect is different. Respect is not looking up. Respect is looking across and being forced to recalibrate. Respect is what you feel for someone you cannot afford to underestimate. Hold that. Read it again slowly. Respect is what you feel for someone you cannot afford to underestimate, because this changes everything, absolutely everything, about what you have been trying to do when you have been trying to earn respect. It means that the credentials you have been displaying are addressing the wrong question. It means that the effort you have been performing is producing exactly the opposite of its intended effect. It means that the warmth and openness and accessibility you have been offering as evidence of your worthiness is being received not as evidence of strength, but as evidence of the specific kind of transparency that makes someone safe to underestimate, respectful, likable, easy to deal with, a little less than fully necessary. That is not a judgment. That is a mechanism, and understanding mechanisms is how you change them. When someone cannot be dismissed without consequence, when their response to being underestimated is not the anxious scramble of someone desperate to re-establish their standing, but the calm, measured, unhurried response of someone who has been underestimated before and found it mildly interesting, the brain that attempted the dismissal recalibrates. Automatically, without conscious decision, it raises its assessment, it increases its care, it produces the specific internal adjustment that we experience as respect. You cannot manufacture this response in others by trying to impress them. You can only produce it by becoming someone that their instincts categorize as costly to dismiss. This is Machiavelli translated into the nervous system. Now let us build the full framework. Because Machiavelli's silent rule does not rest on a single principle. It rests on 4 pillars, 4 interlocking, mutually reinforcing qualities, and the reason most people who understand one of them still do not fully command the room is that the other 3 are still working against them. The pillars are containment, economy, non-reactivity, and selective presence. Each one is a direct inversion of what social conditioning has trained you to do. Each one requires you to trade a short-term comfort for a long-term authority, and each one, practiced consistently, compounds with the others until the sum of them is something qualitatively different from any of them alone. Let's go deep. The first pillar, containment. Containment is the most misunderstood of the 4 because it sounds like suppression, and suppression is violence turned inward. It corrodes, it accumulates, it eventually erupts in ways that destroy everything you have been building. Containment is not suppression. Containment is governance. Consider a river. A river and a flood both carry the same water. They both have force, depth, direction. But the river shapes the landscape over centuries. It cuts canyons, it deposits soil. It creates ecosystems. It is navigated and relied upon and named. The flood destroys in an afternoon and leaves nothing but damage and sediment and a memory of devastation. The difference is not the water. The difference is the banks. Containment is your banks. The contained person feels everything. Do not make the mistake of confusing emotional governance with emotional absence. The man with gravitas, with the weighted, self-possessed composure that Machiavelli identified as foundational to lasting authority, is not numb. He is, in many cases, more sensitive than those around him. He simply does not make his sensitivity the room's problem. He does not broadcast every fluctuation of his interior weather across the frequency of his face, his voice, his body. His word choice. Why does this matter? Because every uninvited signal you broadcast is information, and information in the game of power is leverage. When you show that you are pleased, you have told the person who pleased you exactly how to manage you. When you show that you are hurt, you have handed the person who hurt you the precise location of the wound, and wounds, once located, are remembered, even by people who are not consciously collecting them. When you show that you are nervous, you have communicated that there is something in this situation larger than your capacity to hold it. When you show that you are impressed, you have conceded the hierarchy. Every visible reaction is a card placed face up on the table. In a game where everyone is watching, you cannot afford to play with an open hand. Machiavelli described the prince who maintained gravitas as someone who appeared, to those around him, to have considered everything already, to be not behind the situation, but somehow slightly ahead of it, not because he said anything that indicated this, but because he carried himself with the composed quality of someone for whom the current moment holds no genuine surprise, because he has been further forward in his thinking and has already returned. Whether or not this was literally true was irrelevant. The perception was the reality, and the perception was produced entirely by the quality of his containment. In practice, containment looks like this. Your face moves less than the faces of those around you, not because you have trained yourself into a mask. Masks are visible, and they make people uncomfortable in a different way, but because you have, through consistent practice, built enough space between stimulus and response that the stimulus does not automatically produce a performance. You hear the good news and allow it to land without immediately announcing it to your face. You hear the bad news and take a breath before you decide what, if anything, to show. You receive the challenge and pause before your expression tells the challenger whether they landed it. This pause, this small practiced invisible pause between receiving and responding, is the seat of all containment. It is where governance lives. It is where the river is distinguished from the flood. And over time, as you practice it, something unexpected happens. You begin to discover that the interior space you create through that pause is not empty. It is full. It is full of a quality of attention that you have never had access to before, because you were always too busy performing your reactions to actually experience them. The second pillar, economy. Economy is the principle that scarcity creates value in every domain of human exchange, without exception. This is not a metaphor. It is economics. It is thermodynamics. It is the same law operating at every scale, from financial markets to social dynamics, to the specific texture of what it feels like to receive attention from someone who does not give it freely. When something is abundant, it is ordinary. When something is scarce, it becomes significant. This applies to commodities, to affirmations, to opinions, to presence, to words. You have been making yourself abundant for years. Not your presence in the physical sense. You may actually be quite private. But the presence of your opinions, your reactions, your approval, your attention. You offer these freely, continuously, in quantities designed to communicate that you are generous, that you are engaged, that you are someone worth talking to. And the effect of this generosity, the unintended, invisible, mechanically certain effect, is that what you offer begins to feel ordinary, expected, low cost, and low-cost things are not valued. Watch what happens in any meeting. The person who contributes to every point, who offers opinions on every topic, who affirms every idea with visible enthusiasm, who never allows a silence to exist without filling it with something. This person is heard less than they speak, not because people are dismissing them consciously, but because their contributions have a frequency that has become background noise. Consistent, reliable, predictable, abundant background noise. The person who speaks rarely, and when they speak, speaks briefly and with precision. This person is listened to with a quality of attention that the others in the room do not receive, not because their ideas are superior, but because their words have become scarce. And scarcity makes every utterance carry a weight that frequency has dissolved. Machiavelli understood this at the level of counsel. The prince who asked for advice from everyone received, in effect, no advice, because abundance of counsel creates noise that makes the signal impossible to locate. The prince who consulted sparingly, selectively, and briefly, who made it known, through the economy of his consultations, that being consulted by him was a significant thing, received counsel of a different quality. Because people prepared for it differently, because the stakes felt different, because the scarcity of the opportunity to be heard by him made the hearing itself consequential. Sun Tzu observed the same principle in warfare. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Every word you use to explain yourself is a battle you chose to enter. Every elaboration is a concession that the first version was insufficient. Every additional argument is an admission that the previous ones did not land. Stop fighting battles you don't need to fight. State your position. Hold the silence. Let it stand or fall on its own terms. If it falls, you will learn something useful. If it stands, you have demonstrated something that no amount of persuasive elaboration could have achieved, that you believe in it without needing it confirmed. And that belief, held quietly, without performance, without the visible anxiety of someone waiting to see if the room agrees, is what makes people trust the next thing you say before you finish saying it. In practical terms, economy operates like this. When someone asks for your opinion, give it once, clearly, without the apologetic scaffolding that has become your habitual armor. I think this is the wrong direction. I'd approach it differently. I don't see it that way. And then, this is the part that will feel almost physically uncomfortable the first several times you do it. Stop. Do not immediately explain why. Do not add 3 qualifying caveats designed to make the room comfortable with your position. Do not look around to gauge the reaction, and then retroactively adjust what you just said. State. Hold. Wait. The discomfort in the room that follows is not a problem to be solved. It is information being processed. It is the room recalibrating to the experience of receiving something that was not pre-softened for their convenience. It is, in the specific physiological language that Machiavelli would have recognized immediately, the early stages of respect being formed. When someone praises your work, receive it, not with the cascade of deflection that most people use. Oh, it was nothing. I had a lot of help. I'm not sure it's that good, actually. But with a simple, settled acknowledgement. Thank you. Or, I'm glad it landed. Something that communicates that you agree with their assessment without being surprised by it. Because someone who is surprised by praise is someone who did not believe they deserved it. And someone who did not believe they deserved it is someone the room begins to agree with. When you have a view that diverges from the room's consensus, you do not need to qualify it into near invisibility before you offer it. I see it differently is a complete sentence. It carries more authority than I might be wrong and maybe I'm missing something. And obviously people smarter than me have looked at this, but I just wonder if, not because it is more eloquent, but because it arrives without the built-in apology that tells the room you've already half surrendered it. The economy of your words, your opinions, your reactions, your availability, when practiced consistently, produces something that cannot be manufactured any other way. The experience for the people around you of receiving something that was not freely given. And that experience, simple and ancient and completely resistant to manipulation, produces the involuntary elevation of your standing in a way that years of trying harder cannot. The third pillar, non-reactivity. This is the pillar that separates the studied from the sovereign, and it is the most difficult, because it requires something that years of emotional conditioning have made almost neurologically foreign: the deliberate choice to not express what you are feeling in the moment that you are feeling it most strongly. Let me show you what actually happens in every social and professional dynamic you inhabit. People test each other, constantly, not necessarily with awareness or malice, but every interaction contains micro-tests, small probes designed below the level of conscious intention to locate the shape of who you are. Where are the edges? Where does the composure break? What needs to happen to make you react? What is the location of the wound? This is not pathological. This is how human beings navigate hierarchy, intimacy, and trust. We push slightly, we observe the response, and we update our model of the person accordingly. Children do it most visibly and honestly. Adults do it with more sophistication and far less self-awareness. When you react, when a subtle challenge produces visible defensiveness, when a minor provocation produces visible irritation, when a light criticism produces visible hurt, you have answered the test. You have confirmed the location of the lever, and levers once found are not forgotten. They are not necessarily pulled maliciously, but they operate. They shape how you are handled, how much pressure is applied, how much space is assumed, in ways that compound over time into the full texture of how every relationship and every professional dynamic treats you. The person who cannot be provoked presents a different kind of challenge entirely. When someone attempts to locate the lever and finds nothing, when the probe is received with genuine, visible equanimity, when the test is acknowledged and met with what looks and feels like actual indifference to its result, the prober is left without information. And people without information proceed with caution. They raise their assessment. They become, in the specific and precise sense that Machiavelli intended, uncertain of the cost of underestimation. That uncertainty is not discomfort in the relationship. It is the foundation of lasting respect. Machiavelli's prince did not show anger when betrayed, not because he was not angry, because he understood that visible anger tells the person who provoked it exactly what their provocation accomplished. It confirms that it landed. It confirms that it mattered. It confirms that they have a degree of power over him that they have now exercised and will exercise again. The prince waited. He calculated. He acted precisely at a time of his choosing from a position of composure. Not because he lacked feeling, because his feeling served his mind rather than consuming it. The fire is still there. The difference is in who holds it. In your life, this looks like this specific, difficult, high-value practice. When someone says something designed to destabilize you, and you will know it when it happens, because there is a specific physiological response that distinguishes a genuine question from a probe disguised as a question, you pause. You do not immediately manage your face. You do not rush to produce a response that demonstrates you were not hit. You do not deflect, joke, agree preemptively, or apologize. You receive it, in the full dignity of someone who is not afraid of receiving it. And then, measured, unhurried, with the specific quality of someone who has considered and found the matter less weighty than the person who raised it hoped, you respond. Or you don't. There are situations in which the most devastating and precise response to a probe is no verbal response at all. A look, a brief pause, a slight adjustment of expression that communicates clearly. I heard you, I considered you, and I found you unworthy of the full weight of my attention. No performance, no announcement of the judgment, just the quiet, visible evidence of it. This is what makes rooms recalibrate, not the dramatic moment, not the perfect comeback. The specific experience of encountering someone who cannot be moved by attempts to move them, not because they are defended, but because they are centered, not because they are cold, but because their warmth does not require your approval to remain warm. The fourth pillar, selective presence. The man who is everywhere is important to no one. This is not counterintuitive once you understand the mechanism. Presence, like every other resource, is subject to the laws of supply and demand. When something is everywhere, when it appears at every gathering, responds to every message, accepts every invitation, makes itself available at every hour for every request, it becomes ordinary, expected, frictionless. And frictionless things are not felt, not missed, not valued. The man who sometimes declines, who sometimes doesn't respond immediately, who attends selectively, departs early, is present fully when he is present and absent without apology when he is not. This man creates a specific kind of scarcity around his presence that changes the texture of every interaction. People begin to notice when he arrives, in a way they do not notice the arrival of someone who is always there. They pay closer attention when he speaks, knowing that he speaks selectively. They feel the specific quality of his full attention differently than they feel the attention of someone for whom no interaction rises above a baseline level of engagement, because his full presence, being rare, has become significant. Machiavelli did not write directly about selective presence as a pillar of personal power, but it is threaded through everything he wrote about strategic positioning. The ruler who was endlessly accessible was endlessly petitioned. The ruler who was difficult to reach was met, when reached, with a quality of prepared engagement that the endlessly accessible ruler never received. Access, controlled, produces a different relationship than access, unlimited. In your life, you do not need to respond to every message within minutes. You do not need to attend every gathering. You do not need to make yourself available for every conversation. You do not need to be the person who is always reliably certainly there, not because availability is bad, but because unlimited availability tells people that your time does not belong to you, that it is at the disposal of whoever reaches for it, and time that is at the disposal of whoever reaches for it has no individual value. It has only collective value, the way a common resource does. And common resources are used, they are not cherished. Protect your time not as a strategic performance, but as the natural expression of someone who has a full interior life, a set of priorities, a relationship with their own attention that places real value on what is given. When you genuinely prioritize in this way, when you decline not as a power move but as an honest reflection of where your attention actually serves you, something shifts in how every relationship receives your presence. Because now, when you are present, it means something. It means you chose to be. And choice creates significance. Let's watch these 4 pillars at work. Not in a leadership seminar scenario, not in a negotiation strategy session. In Tuesday, in the ordinary life where power is actually built or surrendered. A colleague makes a dismissive comment about your idea in a group setting. The instinct, trained by years of social conditioning, is to manage the moment, to soften it, to laugh slightly or explain further, or subtly seek validation from the others in the room by looking around to gauge their response. The pillar-aligned response: stillness, a breath. Eye contact with the colleague that is neither aggressive nor deflecting. A brief, measured, "I see it differently." And then the silence that follows, held without visible anxiety, without the flinching movement toward resolution. What has just happened? Containment absorbed the hit without broadcasting it. Economy said everything in 4 words that over-explanation would have diluted across 100. Non-reactivity denied the challenger the confirmation that they landed. And the specific, practiced quality of your stillness, the absence of the scramble the room was unconsciously waiting for, constituted in itself the kind of selective presence that makes the next time you speak into something different from what it was before. Nothing dramatic, nothing performative, just the quiet, consistent, daily expression of someone who has decided they are no longer available for the negotiation of their own dignity. This is what Machiavelli understood in its full depth, not manipulation, not cruelty, not the clever management of others' perceptions. The liberation of the person who has brought the verdict home, who has decided privately, finally, with the kind of quiet firmness that does not require announcement, that their worth is not a question currently open to the floor, and who carries that decision into every room, in every interaction, in the specific quality of their containment and economy and non-reactivity and presence, until the room, perceiving it, processing it, recalibrating around it, responds with the only thing it can respond with when it encounters someone who does not need its verdict, its respect. But the coldest, most precise, most tactical part of this, the specific mechanics of how you implement all of this in the actual texture of your actual days, that is still ahead, and it is where everything becomes real. Stay with me. Now we work, not in theory, not in philosophy, in the specific, granular, uncomfortable mechanics of how you actually change the way the world receives you, starting with the next conversation you have. Because this is where most people fail, not in understanding, in execution. They can hear the concept, they can even feel the truth of it in their chest while it's being explained, and then they walk back into their life and behave exactly as before. Because change without a precise map is just intention, and intention without implementation is just suffering dressed as progress. So let's build the map. Tactic 1. The pause before the response. This is the single most underestimated tool available to you, and it costs nothing. In every conversation, particularly in any moment where you feel challenged, provoked, asked to explain yourself, or pushed to fill a silence, unpause, deliberately, noticeably, not uncomfortably, not aggressively, but with the specific weight of someone who has chosen to consider before responding. Most people respond before they have finished receiving. They are already constructing their reply while the other person is still speaking. This is anxiety in motion. It tells everyone watching that you are reactive, that you are on edge, that the stimulus controls you. The pause reverses this dynamic completely. When someone criticizes your idea in a meeting and you pause, hold eye contact, breathe, remain visibly unhurried, something shifts in the room before you say a single word. The person who challenged you suddenly becomes uncertain. Did they go too far? Are they about to receive something measured and precise? Have they made a mistake? In the space of your silence, they begin to second-guess themselves. You haven't said anything yet, but you've already won the exchange. What do you say when you finally respond? As little as necessary. That's an interesting angle. I hear that. I'll think about it. Or, in situations that genuinely require a more substantive response, you give it, but measured, structured, without the apologetic hedging that signals insecurity. Never. I might be wrong, but, or, sorry if this doesn't make sense, or, I know this sounds strange, but, instead, here's my thinking. I've considered this. Here's where I land. That's not the direction I want to take this. Notice the difference, not aggressive, not cold, just complete, self-contained, no permission being sought. Tactic 2, the strategic withhold. You have been overtelling your entire life. When someone asks how you are, you answer with the full inventory of your week. When someone asks your opinion, you give them not just the opinion, but the entire reasoning chain behind it, and 3 preemptive defenses against objections they haven't even raised yet. When something good happens to you, you announce it immediately to whoever is nearby. When something bad happens, you process it out loud with whoever is available, in real time. This is not connection. This is a compression of your mystery to zero. Machiavelli understood that what is hidden is what is powerful. The army that shows its full formation before the battle has already lost a strategic advantage. The negotiator who reveals the full extent of what they want has already conceded the negotiation. The person who tells you everything about themselves before you've earned the information has already told you they are starved for your attention. The strategic withhold is not lying. It is the deliberate, disciplined practice of not giving more than is being asked for in the moment. Someone asks how you are. Good. Busy with something interesting. Leave the space open. Let them ask. Let them lean in. Don't fill the gap with everything. Fill it with just enough to make them want more. Someone asks about your plans. I have a few things moving. Not the full plan, not the full timeline, not the full hope you've pinned to it. Let it be slightly opaque. Let them feel that there is more beneath the surface than what you're choosing to reveal. Someone asks your opinion on something contentious. I have a view on it, but I want to hear yours first. This is devastating in its intelligence. You've just told them that you have a perspective. You're not empty, but you're not giving it away before you understand the landscape. When you do give it, it will land differently than if you had reached for it immediately. You are a person with a full interior life. Not every room deserves access to it. Tactic 3. The silence response. Some things do not deserve a verbal reply. A comment designed to provoke you does not deserve a defense. A passive-aggressive remark does not deserve a dissection. A test disguised as a question does not deserve the earnest answer it is pretending to ask for. Sometimes, and this requires practice and it is not comfortable until it is, the most powerful response is no response at all, not storming off, not conspicuous silence loaded with visible emotion, simply the quiet acknowledgement, sometimes a look, sometimes a slight nod, sometimes nothing at all, that you received the message and found it unworthy of your full attention. Imagine this. Someone makes a cutting remark about you in a group setting, something lightly dismissive. The reactive response is immediate. The blush, the stumble, the rushed defense, the awkward laugh that isn't a laugh. The powerful response is almost nothing. A slow look in their direction, a brief pause, and then the continuation of whatever was happening before, as if the remark did not succeed in landing, because it didn't. What this signals to everyone in that room, including the person who said it, is not that you didn't hear it. It's that you heard it and were unmoved. And someone who cannot be moved by an attempt to diminish them is someone who knows their value independently of the diminishment. That is not performable. That comes from somewhere real. Build it from the outside in. Act as if consistently until the acting becomes architecture, until the pause becomes instinct, until the stillness becomes real. Tactic 4. The economy of agreement. Stop agreeing with everything, not because disagreement is power, but because reflexive, constant, frictionless agreement is a tell. It tells the room that you are managing their feelings rather than engaging with your own convictions. It tells them that your primary interest is in maintaining approval, not in the actual substance of the exchange. And people sense this. They do not trust the person who agrees with everyone. They may enjoy them, but they do not take them seriously. Because you cannot fully trust someone who changes shape every time the room changes. You cannot respect someone whose opinions seem to arrive pre-calibrated for your approval. The person who occasionally pushes back, calmly, precisely, without drama or heat, is the person whose agreement means something when it comes, because it was earned, because it was genuine, because it told you something about where they actually stand. Disagreement without economy is just conflict. Disagreement with economy is identity. So the next time you find yourself in a conversation where something is being said that you don't believe, don't perform agreement. Hold your position, not loudly, not angrily, simply, I see it differently. Or, I'm not sure I agree with that. And then hold the silence that follows. The first few times you do this, the discomfort will be significant. You have trained yourself across years to smooth things over. The absence of smoothing will feel like disruption. It is not disruption. It is honesty. And slowly, the people around you will begin to receive you differently. They will begin to ask for your opinion, rather than assuming they know it. They will begin to brace slightly before they speak, wondering whether you will simply nod, or whether they might be about to encounter something that challenges them. That bracing is respect. Tactic 5. The exit strategy. The person who never leaves is never missed. Learn to exit. Conversations, rooms, situations. Not dramatically, not coldly, but with the quiet confidence of someone who has somewhere else to be, whether or not they literally do. Leaving before the natural end of an event creates a specific kind of impression. It signals that your time is structured, that it belongs to you, that you are not waiting to see if something better presents itself. It creates a small, precise mystery. Where is he going? What is he doing? What exists in his life that pulled him away? It also, and this is the mechanics Machiavelli would have identified immediately, cuts the interaction at its peak. You leave when the conversation is at its height, not when it has exhausted itself. You leave before the energy drops, and the last impression is the impression that persists. In practical terms, don't stay at the party until everyone is leaving. Don't extend every conversation until it runs out of oxygen. Don't fill every available moment of a social interaction with your presence. Give them the good version of you, and then withdraw it. Let them want the next one. Now let's talk about the errors, the patterns that undo everything, even in people who intellectually understand all of this. Error 1. The explanation that was never requested. Someone questions a decision you made. You did not owe them a justification, but something in you cannot tolerate being misunderstood, so you begin explaining, and explaining. And the more you explain, the more it looks like you are not certain yourself. The explanation becomes its own argument against you. Rule. If someone questions your decision and you are confident in it, acknowledge the question and hold your position. I considered the options. This is where I landed. Done. The moment you over-explain, you invite the negotiation, and you cannot win a negotiation you offered to have. Error 2. Reacting to tests with sincerity. Not every question is a genuine question. Not every challenge is a genuine challenge. Some are probes. Some are tests of your stability. When you treat every test as a genuine question that deserves your full, sincere engagement, you pass all the information they were looking for straight into their hands. Learn to recognize the probe, the question that is not quite a question, the comment that is not quite a comment, and respond to it with the fraction of yourself it actually deserves, not with the full weight of your sincerity. Error 3. Performing indifference. This is the trap the beginners fall into. They understand that non-reactivity is powerful, so they perform it. They stare too long, they refuse to laugh when something is funny. They manufacture an icy demeanor that they wear like armor. This is visible. It is worse than reactivity because it shows that you are working very hard at appearing like you don't care, which tells everyone that you care enormously. True non-reactivity is not performed. It is internal. It comes from the genuine experience of having enough self-regard that external opinion becomes optional rather than essential. The goal is not to look indifferent. The goal is to actually, genuinely, work toward being someone whose peace is not at the mercy of other people's choices. You get there through practice, through the small decisions made over many days, through choosing, again and again, not to react, not because you are performing composure, but because you are genuinely building it. Error 4. Inconsistency. The most damaging thing you can do to the authority you are building is be inconsistent, to hold your ground one day and crumble the next, to be strategic in one relationship and desperate in another, to maintain your silence when the stakes are low and abandon it the moment the stakes feel real. Consistency is the proof. Without it, everything else is theater. With it, even small behaviors accumulate into something that the room can feel, trust, and respect. Here is a scene. Watch it carefully. A colleague at your level has been gradually taking credit for collaborative work. It has been happening in small ways. The mention of my project, when it was a shared project. The direct response to the director's question that didn't include your contribution. You've noticed. Others may have noticed. The question is how you respond. The reactive response, you call it out in a group setting, or you confront them privately with visible frustration, or you begin over-explaining your contributions in every subsequent meeting to make sure people know what you did. All of these responses are costly. All of them make you look like someone who needs to manage their own narrative out of insecurity. The strategic response. You begin speaking first in meetings where your contribution is relevant. Not loudly, not aggressively. You simply, naturally, present the work as if there was never any question about your role in it. If the director looks to the colleague for a follow-up, you add the next piece without hesitation, without fanfare, without looking at the colleague at all. You are not competing. You are simply present. You are simply claiming what is yours as if you had never considered that it might be contested. And over time, not in one dramatic moment but over the course of several interactions, the room recalibrates. The director begins directing certain questions to you. The dynamic shifts. Not because you fought for it, because you occupied it. This is Machiavellian strategy in its purest everyday form. Not manipulation, not cruelty. The quiet, persistent claiming of your own space. You are past the midpoint now. Something in you is processing all of this. Some of it feels familiar, as if you've always known it and are simply being reminded. Some of it feels uncomfortable, as if it requires you to give up a version of yourself you've been protecting. Good. Because what you've been protecting is not keeping you safe. It's keeping you small. The transformation that is available to you through these 4 pillars, through these specific tactics, through the quiet daily practice of choosing economy over anxiety, containment over broadcast, presence over performance, is not a transformation into someone unrecognizable. It is a return to someone you forgot you already were. Before the world told you to explain yourself, before the world taught you to shrink so that others could expand, before you started translating yourself into a language designed for everyone else's comfort, you already have what it takes. The question has only ever been whether you would stop working against it. And now we arrive at the final move, the deepest layer. The part of this that Machiavelli saved for last, not because it is the most complex, but because without everything that came before, it cannot be properly understood. The paradox that lives at the center of all power. Look at where you started. You started with the need to be understood, the need to be seen correctly, the need to have your value legible to every room you entered, confirmed by every interaction you participated in, validated by the responses of people who mostly weren't paying attention. You started with hands open and arms wide, offering everything you were to anyone who looked your direction, not out of generosity, but out of an old, deep, unexamined hunger to be told that you were enough. That version of you is not wrong. That version of you was doing the only thing it knew how to do, but that version of you is done. The person on the other side of this lesson, the person you are becoming as these words settle into the architecture of how you think, does not walk into rooms the same way anymore. He does not arrive with the question hanging invisible above his head, "What do they think of me?" He arrives with something else, something older, quieter, more irrevocable. He arrives with an answer he has already given himself. And that answer, private, unperformable, earned through the small and large acts of self-governance he has been practicing, makes everything different. Not because the room has changed. The room is exactly the same. The same dynamics, the same tests, the same people performing their own version of this ancient hunger. But he moves through it differently. He speaks less and is heard more. He explains nothing and is trusted more. He asks for nothing and is given more. Not because the world became fair. The world did not become fair. The world operates exactly as Machiavelli described it, as a place where power flows toward those who carry it convincingly and drains from those who seek it openly. He simply stopped seeking, and in stopping he became. This is the paradox Machiavelli embedded in The Prince, and that most readers have missed for 5 centuries. The man who does not need respect is the man who receives it most fully, not as a trick, not as a performance strategy, as a natural consequence of the rarest quality in human behavior. The genuine experience of not requiring external validation to know your own worth. When you genuinely do not need the approval, when the peace you carry is not dependent on how the meeting went, on whether she replied, on whether the room noticed, people feel it. It has a texture, it has a gravity. It makes them behave differently in your presence without knowing why. They give you more space. They listen more carefully. They choose their words more deliberately. They feel the specific slight anxiety of not quite knowing what you think of them, because you have not told them, because you have not performed your reactions for their comfort, because you have remained partially opaque in the specific way that makes people lean in rather than look away. This is the rule, silent, invisible, operating underneath every interaction, the foundation on which all other presence is built, and you now have it. Let me be precise about what has changed. You used to over-explain. Now you state and hold. You used to react. Now you pause and choose. You used to fill silences out of anxiety. Now you inhabit them out of strength. You used to seek agreement to feel certain. Now you carry your certainty into the room with you. You used to need people to like you. Now you simply require yourself to respect yourself. And you have learned that the first grows naturally from the second, but never the other way around. You used to enter rooms as a question. Now you enter as a statement. These are not empty distinctions. These are the precise, measurable differences between the person who is talked about after they leave the room in tones of vague concern. Is she okay? He seems like he's trying too hard. And the person who is talked about after they leave the room in the specific, involuntary language of people who have just been in the presence of something they cannot quite account for. There's just something about him. She doesn't say much, but when she does, the room changes. I don't know, he makes me feel like I need to bring my best. These are not compliments about skill or achievement or eloquence. They are descriptions of a quality of being, a presence, a gravity. And gravity, this is what Machiavelli knew, and what Newton formalized in a different discipline, and what every great leader, every great negotiator, every person who has ever held a room without demanding it, has understood in their bones. Gravity is not performed. It is a consequence of mass, of density, of having built, through discipline and intention and the painful practice of self-governance, an interior life solid enough to generate its own pull. You are building that. It takes time. It is not a single decision. It is 10,000 small decisions, most of them unglamorous, all of them compounding. But it is real, and it is yours. And nobody can take it from you, because unlike status, unlike wealth, unlike the approval of other people, it lives entirely on the inside. Now here is the truth that I promised you as the paradox at the center, the thing that connects all of this into something larger than a set of tactics. The reason most people never command genuine respect is not because they lack skill. It is not because they lack intelligence or presence or natural authority. It is because they are, without knowing it, fighting a war on two fronts simultaneously. The external war to be seen correctly by the world, and the internal war against their own worth. And you cannot win two wars at once. Every ounce of energy spent managing the perception of others is energy taken from the only project that actually matters, becoming someone whose self-perception requires no external corroboration. Machiavelli was, at his core, writing about this, not about cruelty, not about manipulation in the mean-spirited sense, about the liberation of the person who has stopped outsourcing their worth, who has brought the verdict entirely home, who has made themselves the final court of appeal on the question of their own value, and who has rendered a verdict of sufficiency so complete, so settled, so unshakable, that the world has no alternative but to organize itself around it. That is the rule. It was never really about silence as a technique. It is about silence as a consequence, the silence of someone who has nothing to prove, the stillness of someone who has nowhere else to be but exactly where they are. When you become that person, not the performance of it, but the genuine lived experience of it, you will not need to remember the tactics. They will be the natural expression of how you move. The journey ahead is not short. I won't lie to you and tell you that you'll wake up tomorrow transformed. Transformation is not an event. It is the accumulation of choices. The choice to pause before responding again. The choice to hold your position under pressure again. The choice to exit before the party ends again. The choice to let the silence sit again. The choice to require nothing from the room while offering it everything that is genuinely yours. These choices build a person, slowly, like stone. But here is what I want to leave you with. Not as comfort, not as motivation, but as fact. You have always been capable of this. The hunger for validation you have been feeding was never an indication of weakness. It was an indication of how much you understood your own worth and how badly you wanted it confirmed. You sensed what you were. You simply looked for the confirmation in the wrong direction. Turn around, face yourself. That is where the respect you have been seeking has been waiting all along. Not in the room's reaction, not in the approval, not in the recognition. In the quiet, daily, unglamorous act of being someone who keeps their own counsel, holds their own ground, and trusts their own judgment enough that the world, eventually, inevitably, without being asked, catches up. Machiavelli wrote for princes, but the principle is yours. You do not need a kingdom to carry it. You need a decision, made privately, held consistently, reinforced daily by the small choices that no one will ever see but that build, over time, into something everyone feels. The man who commands respect without saying a word has not found a trick. He has found himself, and having found himself, he has nothing left to perform. If this message landed somewhere real in you, not just in your mind but in the part that already knew this and needed to hear it said clearly, then I want you to do something. Leave a comment below with this single line: "My silence is my answer." Not as a response to this video, as a declaration, as the quiet commitment that you are making, right now, to the person you are in the process of becoming. A commitment that requires no audience, no approval, no reply. Just the words on the screen and you knowing what they mean. That is not a comment. That is a contract with yourself. And if you are someone who wants to keep building this, who wants to go further into the architecture of power, presence, and self-sovereignty that Machiavelli and the great thinkers of strategy left behind, then subscribe to this channel. Not because I ask you to, but because you have decided that this is the quality of thinking you want more of in your life. This channel is not for everyone. It is not a place of easy comfort or convenient reassurance. It is a place where the truth is told in the specific, difficult, precise way that actually changes something. When you subscribe, you are not joining a community in the casual sense. You are choosing a standard. You are telling yourself, not me, yourself, that you are someone who takes their own development seriously enough to keep showing up for it. That choice is entirely yours. Go now. Not into the world as you were before this started. Into the world as someone who has been reminded of what they have always carried, but too often left at the door. Let your silence be your strength. Let your stillness be your strategy. Let your presence speak before you do. And let what follows be worth the wait. Machiavelli understood that the most dangerous person in any room was never the loudest. It was the one who had nothing to prove. Go be that person.